while the future is uncertain, I do not believe we are going to be stuck in this kind of particular paralysis we're in now indefinitely. I just think it can't possibly hold, and I think that hopefully in ways that will be encouraging, the future will surprise us.
You are listening to Fruitless, a podcast hosted by me, Josiah Sutton. This is episode 26, The End of the End of History, featuring Luke Savage from Michael and Us and Jacobin. Hello, everybody. I'm Josiah, and I am joined today by Luke Savage, staff writer for Jacobin, co-host of the Michael and Us podcast alongside Will Sloan, author of The Dead Center, Reflections on Liberalism and Democracy After the End of History, and co-author of the late Ed Broadbent's memoir, Seeking Social Democracy, 7 Decades in the Fight for Equality. Welcome, Luke.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, one thing I did think about kind of starting off here is talking about Ed Broadbent's kind of, influence on your thought. He's not a figure I'm, very familiar with, but I know that he's been pretty important to you and kind of the formation of your view of social democracy. So do you want to tell a little bit about him?
Sure. Well, for those who aren't familiar with Ed, he was the leader of the New Democratic Party of Canada between 1975 and 1989. He actually, I guess, stepped down from the leadership when I was, 8 months old, something like that. So, I was not really contemporary with his political career or the bulk of it. But he was for 2 decades, really, one of the most recognizable and well-respected, widely respected figures on the left in Canada. He was his personal popularity in the 80s. Was higher than that of any other national politician. He was also the first first leader of the NDP or its predecessor, the CCF, to lead the party to first place in opinion polls. I guess it was 8 days ago. There was a state funeral for him in Ottawa, which I had the honor of speaking. And I think the fact that he had a state funeral at all, which is very rare for a non-prime minister, I think is a testament to how even 35 years after he was leader of the NDP, there was still just remarkable affection and respect for him. He was a formative figure within, the Canadian left, but also he had, a lot of respect and admiration from across the political spectrum. He was also, he really was an intellectual. So, I think he's a rare example of someone who comes from a kind of academic background. His background was working class in Oshawa, which is, for American listeners, has a lot of similarities with somewhere like Detroit. It was, a big union town, built around automaking. He went to university and developed, a lot of ideas about philosophy and political economy, and then, turned out to be a very effective politician. And I had the immense privilege of working with him and 2 colleagues on the book you mentioned off the top, which is kind of a broad series of reflections from Ed on his life, and also a series of dialogues between the 3 of us and him. That came out on October the 10th, so just about 3 months before Ed, tragically passed away.
Moving back down to kind of American politics, or maybe just general politics, world politics. As the title of The Dead Center, or the subtitle, suggests, the end of history is a big part of your thinking, right? And, I think it's something that I come back to a lot, because I've also been influenced by like Mark Fisher
Sure.
and stuff like that, and how I look at politics. And I think right now is an interesting moment to kind of reflect on kind of as we're winding down the Biden administration, what are we at the end of history? You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, it's interesting the way you formulated that, because you're winding down the Biden administration. I mean, I guess it's an open question what will happen. But we're certainly at the tail end of,
my bias
Biden's
coming out in that
first
question.
term, and it may, right. Maybe Biden's first of two terms, or it may be, his first and only term. I guess we'll see, and perhaps we can talk about, the various possibilities a little further down the line here.
Absolutely.
In terms of the sort of burden of your question, I mean, I'm not sure how much detail to go in here, but I mean, obviously, the writer Francis Fukuyama had this famous book, The End of History and the Last Man, in the 1990s. But I would say that the phrase "the end of history" has sort of taken on a life of its own. It's become synonymous with, I think, a particular idea that was very popular in the 1990s and had really broad kind of intellectual and political buy-in, which was this notion that the 1990s were sort of going to go on forever, right? There was going to be a sort of a world order premised on sort of unipolar American power. Every country was going to become a sort of U.S.-style liberal democracy. There were other facets to it as well. The internet was, of course, becoming a thing. And so there was an idea that basically a certain kind of liberal capitalism is just going to be totally hegemonic. It'll go on forever. So all the big developments that had kind of punctuated the 20th century, all the sort of grand ideological experiments and projects, began with, depends on where you start at, the French Revolution or wherever else, the things that have characterized the modern age, that's done. And, what we've got to look forward to, and some people were genuinely, this wasn't tongue in cheek, they generally were looking forward to it, is kind of a political future that looks like Clintonism, and culturally looks like Friends, the TV show or something, right? Historical progress just kind of grinds to a halt. Maybe there's other kinds of progress, technological, or people's paychecks were going to allegedly get bigger, and there was going to just be this continued growth of there's always going to be more consumer goods, et cetera, et cetera. But history was kind of frozen in time, and the strength, and obviously that doesn't really hold.
Of course,
doesn't hold. Again, this is one of those things where you could date it in various places, but you could date it with 9/11. You could date it with the financial crisis. I think for me, that's really the big one. Sort of the first financial crisis. The 2010s, which among other things, Vincent Bevins has written about in his new book. It's kind of decade of protest that I don't think, the kind of real zealots in the 1990s, I don't think really predicted that sort of decade lay ahead, particularly so soon after,
right.
The 1990s. And then, there were these kind of, there have been these kind of unexpected left-wing insurgencies as well in places like Britain, the United States. There is, my generation, and by the looks of you, yours as well, who've...
I'm actually a little bit younger than you.
Oh, you're younger than me?
Yep.
Well, so my generation then, and also the one that's younger, just do not have the same faith in liberal democratic capitalism as many people. I don't want to generalize too much about how generations feel, but I think, many people who are, who were born before us. And so... Mm-hmm. We're living in a very strange moment, because the end of history, as I think you were hinting at in your question, it's obviously over, but it's not really clear what's coming next. We're living in a strange moment, which I tried to sort of capture in my book, and which is right there in the title of my book, where the center's kind of collapsed, but it's all like in the sense of having legitimacy, having any kind of widespread popular buy-in, because a lot of people, as I said, were very excited about this in the 1990s, not just elites, to some extent, the American public and various other publics as well. But there's not really any popular buy-in. The machine is still going, but it's not really clear where it's from where it's drawing fuel. It's kind of running on fumes, and I think that is the main feature of our current political moment, and the thing that makes it so strange.
Yeah. There's a sense that obviously nothing seems to be quite working, but also that it's really difficult to imagine what comes next. And yeah, I think maybe an important aspect of how we've gotten to where we're at now, and something that you've written about quite a bit, is the Obama administration.
Sure.
I know that was something that you've referenced in writing, that was like a big politically formative moment for you. Do you want to say a little bit about like the kind of betrayal of the Obama administration?
Sure. But so are you a Zoomer? I mean, where were you on election night?
Oh
in
yeah, I should say. Yeah, so I'm born in '97, so I'm a Zoomer.
Right.
Right. Kind of millennial.
So you might have a faint sort of memory of that event, but like it probably wasn't. Probably doesn't have the same kind of formative quality.
And I was raised in like a conservative evangelical household, so that was a dark day. It was like, oh no, the liberals.
Oh gosh, well I would love to hear about that, but no. I mean. For me, I mean, I think that it's really not possible to be someone from sort of my background and my location in 2008 and not have, the election of Barack Obama and the sort of campaign that preceded it, be a formative moment. If you were, so I mean, I was at the University of Toronto, right? I'm a Canadian, but plenty of Americans studied at the University of Toronto, and even if that hadn't been the case, I mean. People were following it so closely. I mean, lots of people in my, dorm, my residence, lots of people at my college who were not politically inclined. Everybody was following this. Everyone was excited. When CNN broke the news that Obama was gonna win the presidency, I mean, people just streamed out into the quad. People were crying. They were, punching the air, hugs. I mean, it was quite extraordinary, and I think that reflected the hopes that a lot of people had, and not just people of my generation. I mean, Obama, to many of us, really seemed like he was the negation of everything that had made the George Bush era so horrible. And there was this burgeoning financial crisis, and it seemed like, well, here's a guy from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. He's gonna get tough on Wall Street. He's such a gifted communicator. We thought he was going to inaugurate a new political order. And actually there's an essay in my book in which I review some of the commentary from that era. And I mean, if you go back to it now, it's kind of like a dispatch from an alien realm or something. I mean, what people were predicting was going to happen. So, obviously there's there are kind of the stages of grief, if you want. There's the various things that you kind of do to process, where the Obama administration ultimately went. And I think people drew different conclusions about what was going on. Obviously, the liberal explanation for the Obama presidency, which I don't subscribe to, I think is not really you can't substantiate it, is that he was just frustrated by sort of Republican intransigence and that kind of thing. And he basically pushed as far as anyone could have reasonably expected him to push. Now, I don't think that's true. If you look at what Obama himself has written in his recent memoir, the first volume of it that came out in 2021, I guess, his opposition to, for example, really cracking down on Wall Street after the financial crisis, that was ideological. He says quite explicitly that he didn't want to do that. He doesn't believe in that kind of thing. He's not a believer in activist government. He has a very sort of anemic and Spartan conception of the role of the state and what the role of the president should be. And so I think many people, and this really began to make itself clear during first, I think, Occupy Wall Street, but then the first of the two Bernie Sanders presidential campaigns. Many people who were of the age to have been enthusiastic about Obama's election, I mean, we're just not buying. They weren't buying the kind of premise that they'd bought in 2008, and they weren't buying the liberal explanations for why the Obama presidency had failed, and they wanted an alternative. They wanted a different approach, and that's why they were attracted to a figure like Bernie Sanders in record numbers. There was a lot of talk in 2008 about Obama's youth support, which I think at the time did break records. But I mean, Sanders got more votes. I mean, it's like I'm forgetting the exact figure, but it's like I think it was more votes than if you tallied up in the primaries, like Obama, Clinton, and Trump combined, or something like that.
Oh my God!
I mean, it was orders of magnitude larger. And so, the Obama presidency is, I think, a formative moment for all those reasons. It was a time where, perhaps mistakenly, but earnestly, a lot of us thought, things really are going to change. There's going to be a new kind of political order that even Republicans are going to have to operate within. It's going to be kind of Reagan revolution, but not for evil. That was exactly. That was
Right.
That was a feeling. And I honestly think that even some, like very, intelligent and politically sophisticated people on the left thought that also, even if they didn't think that Obama was a radical. And so I think what happens when, the prophecy fails, is that, many people, I think some people decide that actually it was them that failed, and really, like, the country failed Obama in some way. And I think other people come to perhaps a better conclusion.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that I think that speaks a lot to the prospects of, like, progressive politics in the United States. There was a sense that we did get our guy in, and then he betrayed us. And so is there any point in trying this? Let
me actually say one thing, because I should have mentioned this, one thing more on this. I mean,
sure. Just
to be even more concrete about it, in 2008, the Democratic Party not only won the presidency with this huge kind of, like, the extent to which Obama had a mass movement is debatable, given that the voter turnout, I think, was still below 60%. But there's no doubt that there was a very engaged, mass of people around the Obama campaign. The Democrats, though, also, they had a big majority in the House. They had 60 votes in the United States Senate after June of 2009 because of the Senate special election that brought, I think it was Al Franken in. So every single piece was in place. Every piece was on the board. As far as what many liberals and kind of progressive Democrats had thought, like, these are the things we need. This is the scenario we need in order to, pass an agenda of, universal public health care, Wall Street reform, campaign finance reform, control of prescription drug prices, you name it. And not only did that not happen, but by the 2010 midterms, the Obama, the Democrats were so unpopular, and the sort of populist wave that Obama had ridden in 2008 was, increasingly sort of being capitalized on by the right and the Tea Party. Like the Obama thing collapsed very quickly. Obviously, he won the presidency in 2012, but the losses the Democratic Party faced or suffered under Obama beginning in 2010, were really quite profound. And so, there's many ways in which the Obama experience tested the assumptions that many liberals and progressives had held, and it turned out those assumptions really didn't hold up.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like you mentioned, the rise of the kind of insurgent right going on under that, clearly set the stage for the Trump administration leading forward, the Tea Party, whatever, the kind of racial rhetoric that was floating around at the time, all was setting the stage. One before we move forward, kind of a side tangent here, but I would like to hear your thoughts on kind of Obama's post-presidency kind of like celebrity kind of thing he's been doing.
Sure. Well, this is actually an interesting topic, and I feel like it's been underexplored because it's just sort of like, well, first of all, because it's just presumed now, and it has been since roughly the 90s, that the thing that presidents do, unless you're Jimmy Carter, is you just go off and you make like just truckloads of money, and it does not matter where you get it, and maybe there's some pretense to you're doing charity or something like that. But I mean, I think it was George H.W. Bush who sort of set the precedent for like massive speaking fees and that kind of thing. And Obama has really taken this even further, where it's like, he's not just doing, these ghastly, like grotesque speeches to like the banks that he didn't regulate or prosecute during the during the financial crisis. But he's like, yeah, he's trying to become he's like wants to be the influencer, right? He's publishing these perfectly curated like middle brow lists of books that he likes and or ostensibly likes, and music and all the rest of it. And it's really interesting to kind of like when you sit and you study these lists, which I'm a sicko, so obviously I've done. You find that they are very much an extension of what his political brand has always been, going back to the speech that really put him on the national stage in 2004 at the Democratic National Convention. That was his speech where he said, there's no red states and blue states. There's only the United States. We have some gay friends in the red states, and we have, we don't like the government poking around our public libraries in the blue states, or whatever. There was the kind of slew of things, right? And that is Obama's main rhetorical move. You can find it. He's been doing that since he wrote Dreams from My Father, which was his memoir in the 90s. It came out actually before he was well known. That is the Obama special. It is setting up a bunch of things that are generally regarded as opposites, and then sort of explaining or implying that actually conflict is illusory, and it's sort of resolved in some way by his own biography or autobiography, and like his ascent to the presidency or his fame or whatever. So he did that throughout his presidency. And if you look at these lists, I mean, it's incredible. Like, I think it was 2021, his list included a version of, it was Aretha Franklin covering the band's The Weight with Dwayne Allman on guitar. So like, there you have, it's the perfect, medley of like heartland American sounds. It's white, it's black, it's like, it's like Southern. It's the band. Like it's all there, and so he's still very much doing the same thing. I think the most interesting sort of innovation's the wrong word. It's too positive. The most interesting experiment that he's done is this podcast with Bruce Springsteen, which I think is a really good, which I'm slapping myself that I didn't find time to write about it when they did it. Actually, I emailed the publisher repeatedly to ask for a copy of the book that they released in tandem, and would you believe it, they never sent it along. And I was like, I'm not paying $50 for an Obama Bruce Springsteen book. I could buy like a whole Springsteen box set for that, and then at least I'd have fun. But that show is, I mean, I'm not saying this. I'm saying this in like if you're a sicko who wants to study Obama kind of way, not in I'm recommending you listen to it kind of way. But the show really is interesting because like Obama and Springsteen, like they see their roles, it seems, in a very similar way. Except the thing about Springsteen is that he's an artist. So when he is a myth maker and he's inventing a kind of persona for himself, and like, he's doing that consciously as somebody who wants to tell American stories. Like, that's what we expect from artists. It's what we need.
That's what an artist does. Yeah.
That's literally what an artist does. And then, when Obama does it, and he's really kind of upsetting. Just like harvesting all of these cultural signifiers and reference points and like attaching them to his own biography. It's like, that's not what we expect or should expect or want from political leaders, right? Yeah. We shouldn't want them to be these like, pastoral figures who like tend the national lawn and mediate between the different like, cultural, groupings or however Obama would conceive it. We want them to advance an agenda, right? It's right. Like
to Obama make things that we voted you in to do the things that we voted for you to do.
Exactly right. And that is not how Obama saw his role. So the podcast is interesting because he and Springsteen, conceive of their roles as similar, but the way Springsteen does it is, perfectly legitimate, and the way Obama does it is completely absurd. And of course, I think the one instance where Springsteen tries to talk about the financial crisis, Obama just, steers it away very quickly and deftly. Nope, let's not talk about that.
No. Did you see Leave the World Behind? It was I think it was a Netflix movie, but that was the one the Obamas produced.
No, what's that one about?
It's a post-apocalypse movie. Actually, I think you would go apeshit watching it. I think I think it would be a hilarious future Michael and Us episode.
One to investigate for sure.
Yeah, because it's not like they don't. I think the only impact the Obamas had on the movie is that a lot of the songs are from also appear in Obama's playlists. I think that's about it.
I mean that in and of itself, just that detail is fascinating, because that is like. That's like it's like cross-platform integration, but with like high-level influencer stuff. Like that is like when, God, I'm forgetting what the Star Wars thing was, where in order to understand the plot of like one of the movies or video games, you had to also buy you had to buy like a DLC and like what I don't know whatever it was, but it was like. You had to buy separate things that were part of different media and were available on different platforms to get like the deep.
You had to do research to understand this media object.
Yeah. So it's like this is like it's also, I guess you could look at it more straightforwardly as just like product placement. It's like it's like Obama, like these are the songs that he's trying to elevate. Presumably some of them composed or produced by people who come to his birthday parties. And then he's like, we'll do you a solid. We'll put it in this movie we're producing.
Yeah. But the thing is, even if he played no role in like the actual story of the movie, having Obama appear at the front of the movie frames everything that happens after it. And the movie goes on about how, wow, there's so many nations that would like want to do military action against the US. And I don't want Obama saying that. You guys, it's like, I wonder why. Yeah. I wonder if the guy whose name on this movie is maybe responsible for some of that. Anyway, maybe move on. We can move on here to the kind of Trump administration afterwards. So I think for like where 2008 was a big formative political moment for you, I think people around my age, 2016, is that, which I think is kind of an interesting difference, because I think being more closer to like the millennial side, you'll have a politics that's framed by, it seemed like there was prospect for progressivism, and then it was betrayed. As I think Zoomers are framed by a politics of crisis constantly. Yes. Because since I started really paying attention to politics in college during the Trump administration. And so it was just a constant sense of crisis. And I think that there's something that kind of Zoomers might miss out on because of not being super active during the Obama administration, is realizing that so many of the people that are putting themselves up as the ones that are fighting the crisis, fighting Trump or whatever, are often the ones that were creating the situation that produced him in the first place. So, I guess what did you kind of make of the Trump administration? Like what did it represent in politics? I know that's a huge question, but it's an interesting question. I think I guess what was really the big question when Trump took office was, to what extent are the, if you want, the heterodox noises that he's made, some of the particular, the especially weird people around him that aren't coming from like, the Republican machine or the what's called the conservative movement, which was, very hostile in general to Trump during the primary. To what extent is any of that going to matter? And I think that basically the Trump presidency, so what was at stake, if you want, was, just before I continue, was like, to what extent has right-wing politics reinvented itself, and to what extent is Trumpism just sort of continuity with the past? And I think, after, with the benefit of hindsight, I think what we could say is Trump represented continuity. Notwithstanding his weird personal style, which is unique, he represented continuity with, I think, previous incarnations of the right much more than he did
change, right? The signature policy achievements, if you want, I don't want to use the word achievement, but you know what I mean, of the Trump administration were two things that the Republican right has sought for a very long time. One, the overturning of Roe versus Wade by the U.S. Supreme Court, and two, a massive tax cut for the richest people in the country. So, Trump had made all these noises about, there was going to be, they might raise taxes on rich people. They might do a kind of like, some kind of parochial form of redistribution where they would figure out a way to only have it apply to, white people or something. They were going to, there was talk of like, because Trump was totally non-committal about, he was going to get rid of Obamacare, but he was totally non-committal about what he was going to replace it with, because in his very Trump way, he was just like, well, it's going to be big, it's going to be great, it's going to be better. It's funny, if you go back and you read the National Review's editorial in their Never Trump issue, a lot of the stuff that they're concerned about is that Trump won't pursue like traditional right-wing objectives. Yeah. There's a line in that piece that's always stuck with me where they're like, his past, praise of Canadian-style healthcare suggests that, Trump and Bernie Sanders may share more in common than funky outer borough accents. Yeah. So that was like what the conservative movement, that was their main line of attack on Trump. And it turned out that actually, nope, he's good. We're doing the tax cut. We're stacking the court. We're gutting the regulatory state through executive orders, all that kind of stuff. So, they did ostensibly renegotiate NAFTA, but if you look at the fine print, they basically just put a new paint job on the existing agreement and called it, a win for U.S. industry and manufacturing or whatever. So, I think the Trump administration, you can say it's different in some ways from past administrations, but I think the difference is less qualitative and more a difference of degree. It was intense, and it was like a horrific onslaught in almost every single area. Trump was more successful in pushing a right-wing agenda in some areas than others. I think the way, one of the principal ways liberals, or many liberals, have understood the Trump administration is that it's like this new thing. And actually there's some rational or like, humane kernel in like the old Republican Party that can be salvaged. And I mean, I would challenge anyone who still thinks that to watch any of the debates in the Republican primaries in which Trump wasn't present, but which all the others were, and were basically, calling for a sixth crusade or seventh crusade or whatever, Yeah,
absolutely. There's a really good essay by Anton Yeager, Everything is Hyperpolitical, that appeared in The Point. One thing that stuck with me, because I reread it for something recently, was the concept of like that division between politics and policy that took place throughout the kind of post-politics era, where politics is the getting that mass sentiment or whatever, but it's not like actually being able to enforce your will on the establishment in any way. And so his kind of framing of that was that politics had kind of gone into the media sphere, had gone into just being about public expression, while policy is, now handed over to technocrats. I think probably the innovation of the Trump administration was to really, really heighten the politics, but functionally do policy the same way. So really get us invested in these big discourses, but like nothing changes fundamentally.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And, you saw that both in the liberal media and the conservative media as well, where people, particularly those who, watch too much cable news became, really quite, deeply invested in these grand narratives that sometimes had no basis in reality. And, in different ways, if you, compare, like, you might think of Russiagate on the one hand and QAnon on the other, which is, this completely unhinged outgrowth of the, the fact that I think that, the Trump administration, many people who were enthusiasts for it literally thought it was going to solve all of their problems. And then when it didn't, instead of, this was their when prophecy failed moment, instead of saying, well, actually Trumpism wasn't what we thought, they were like, well, actually Trump is a crusader in a 700-year like secret like time traveling war against the deep state or, whatever. And those discourses had something in common, and several things in common. One of them was the fact that, people could kind of, there was like an ersatz or like a phony kind of participation people could do. QAnon is especially the case, and Will Sommers' book on it, he charts this, wonderfully. People could feel like they're doing something because they're watching all of these, clips, news clips. They're reading all these documents. They're like looking for breadcrumbs. In many cases, just inventing things whole cloth. They're having all these debates with one another about whose piece of evidence is legitimate and like what is the proper like interpretation of the QAnon, the Q drops and that kind of thing. So people could feel like they were really affecting change in some way, like they're participating meaningfully. But as Anton details in that wonderful essay of his, it's all just kind of like a hyper spectacle. It's feverish and it's intense. It's full of sound and fury. But yeah, it signifies nothing apart from a dialing up of a culture war that really bears very little relation to the calculations made by policymakers, the decisions they make, or anything like that. Incidentally, I met Anton when I was in London a few weeks ago, and we were talking about this, and I told him that the thing I liked most about his essay was the thing captured by the second part of the headline, which was, it's because the title or the subtitle was, everything is political, but no one can do anything about it. And I think that's another thing to return to the question the second question you asked me off near the top of the conversation, about what makes our moment distinct. And I mean, I really think this kind of strange combination of everything being hyper political, but there being a sort of unique lack of real avenues for meaningful democratic input or participation, which is different from the 1990s. Because in the 1990s, in many ways, it's a post-political time, but lots of people were perfectly serene about that. They didn't care. And now people definitely care. And, I think that the dissonance between the hyper political reality we live in and the avenues for democratic participation explains a lot of the current moment and what makes it so surreal and strange and difficult to navigate.
Yeah. I think that actually transitions really nicely into moving into talking more about the Biden administration specifically now, because I think that is the feeling I have had for 4 years now. It feels like living through the Biden administration is that politics had been dialed up so much in the Trump administration, they've stayed dialed up. But I also don't feel like anything's happening. Like I was pretty active in the 2020 protests. Nothing came of that, really. A lot of those reforms were pulled back within, by the end of the year.
Yes.
Same thing even goes now when I've gone to Palestine, solidarity protests. I think it's still good to go to those, but like there is a sense that like I'm just all I know how to do is just perform and express, but not make anything happen,
Sure. I mean, I think going to demonstrations is, I think that is, I think that's worthwhile. And I mean, I think that the experience of 2020 and, what was it seems by some measures, the single biggest protest movement in U.S. history, the fact that
right.
the fact that the Democrats kind of rode it into the White House or, certainly tried to align themselves with it. And then by, Biden's, I can't remember his first or second State of the Union, right? He's talking about how we need to fund the police. It's, I mean, it is, it's very, very frustrating. It's interesting. I don't really disagree with anything in your question, but I do think there's one wrinkle I would introduce into
Sure.
Into kind of how we think about the last few years, because there are some measures by which the Biden administration actually has dialed down a lot of the stuff, or the dialing, whether to the extent to which Biden is an agent of this, of course, is an open question. But like the Biden administration has been it has corresponded with a period where a lot of the sort of hyper political things we saw during the Trump era have really de-escalated. To give concrete examples, I wrote about this, I think, last fall. If you look at the book sales of major books by major published by major publishing houses, by journalists who often, during the same people who would sell hundreds of thousands of copies of their Trump era books, if you look at the equivalent books that a lot of those people wrote during the Trump era, I mean, like the numbers that the Biden era books are doing are like, they're embarrassing. I mean, they're like, there is, I believe, an official biography of Jill Biden that I think has sold fewer copies than The Dead Center. I mean, don't quote me on that, but I remember from the metrics, I haven't seen the latest metrics for The Dead Center, but I mean, I believe the sales figures were below 5,000 for that book. And there's a book about Obama-Biden, their relationship, that sold, I think under 10,000. It might have been under 5,000 as well. They're in the article. You can, kind of run through it. Similarly, if you look at metrics for engagement on social media with news and current affairs content, between early 2021 and I believe the following year, they'd been cut in half. So this is one area where you might say, in a slightly facetious way, that Bidenism has kind of succeeded, because I do think what a lot of people wanted from it was to just not have to pay attention to the news in the way that they felt they needed to during the Trump era. This was, it echoes the 2016 slogan, or post 2016 slogan, if Hillary had won, we'd be back at brunch, right? Or we'd be at brunch. Right. So that's what a lot of people wanted. They wanted to go back to brunch. They wanted to return to a sort of political reality where, like, post 2016, they weren't going to have to worry about Donald Trump's ascendancy in the Republican primaries. Once in a while, they'd check in. Hillary would be courtside with Ellen, dabbing at a, Mets game or something, or that's the wrong sport, you know what I mean? But I do actually know what kind of team the Mets are. I simply misspoke. That was a gaffe, if you want. But no, so that's one area where I think, like, the Biden administration has kind of, or like the Biden era has sort of seemed to weirdly deliver on its promise. Although, that has obviously been, that has been contemporaneous with all of these protests and other things. So it's difficult to assess, but that's just sort of one possible kind of qualification I would introduce.
Yeah, well, I think an interesting follow-up to that, though, is, since of course October 7th, it feels like things are hyper-political again. Like, things have gotten ramped up. I don't know if there's metrics to back that up, but I wonder to what extent that has caused some problems for what Biden had successfully done, which was kind of return to normalcy or whatever. Is that now again we have protesters in the streets again? It's starting to feel like the Bush era again with the warmongering, right?
Yeah, maybe. Although I think that Biden's problems in this regard really began sort of it started by the third year of his presidency. I think when Biden failed to pass, the lion's share of what was ostensibly his agenda. And I think when it became clear that Donald Trump was going to run again and was, had a very good chance. I mean, I never thought there was any question Trump would win the Republican nomination. And I really think after, the recent primary and caucus results, I mean, there's really, the question's been put to rest. Like, Nikki Haley is not going to win the Republican presidential nomination, much as some... extremely online libs may want to cheer for her, which is a thing that I've actually seen.
Sorry, Ross Douthat. I'm sorry.
That's right. But it's So I think the problems kind of started earlier. I think there was a lot of discontent. I mean, if you look at particularly sagging youth support for Biden, like his approval rating among under 30s or even under 40s. Those, younger people were absolutely essential to his narrow electoral college and popular vote victories in, I guess popular vote was a bit larger than the electoral college, but in 2020. And yeah, I mean, not only has he done nothing to turn that around, but now he's at odds with according to polls,
actually aggravating them.
At least half of the younger people certainly, but at least half of the people who voted for him in 2020. So yes, I definitely think there's been a return to the political, and look, I think that was always going to happen. Even if recent events that you referred to hadn't occurred, because Trump was always going to win the Republican nomination, and once Donald Trump is, once he has the national spotlight again, it's like that is what Trumpian politics is. If it's anything, it is a constant, ongoing, relentless spectacle, and it's a spectacle of Trump's own performance and the people who are stimulated by that, but it's also a spectacle of reaction to Donald Trump. And so I think that the hyper political was always going to return, and to some extent, it's now just a regular feature of every U.S. election cycle,
Yeah.
But it's going to be, I think, particularly feverish going into the election later this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I don't know to what extent this is an impact on support, but I also think of like the first half of the Biden administration versus the second half. During the first half, aside from feeling like, Bernie was ripped off and all of that kind of feeling after 2020, I was starting to be kind of okay with Biden, pulling out of Afghanistan, even if it wasn't done the best. Look, we're ending the forever wars, it feels like, finally. But I think also a lot of that relied on what felt like the general consensus in 2020, 2021 was that, Biden's just here for one term, and then we're going to try again next term.
Well, he did say that. I mean,
okay,
that's
he did
like
actually
something.
I couldn't remember if that was like a Mandela effect thing.
No, there's something. Yeah. It's one of those. It's like the Berenstain Bears. No, I mean, there was, I believe, unless I'm completely insane, there was an interview he did or something else where he said, I see this as kind of like, I'm going to have one term and then I'm going to turn things over to the new generation or something.
Yeah, that'd be great, man.
You could check it, but I don't think I'm wrong to remember that. But regardless, I think you're right about the first year of the Biden administration, possibly the first 2 years. I mean, there were a number of things that did seem to distinguish, or frankly did distinguish his response to the economic situation created by the pandemic that really diverged from the approach Obama had taken in 2008 or 2009 rather. There was the American Rescue Plan, which was passed in either late January or early February of 2021, of 2021, which, was a very large stimulus package. It included these direct cash payments to Americans, these unemployment checks, which the Trump administration had done a version of as well, although the Biden stimulus was a lot more effective in many ways, and it was more redistributive in its outcomes, at least as far as regular people rather than corporate boardrooms was concerned. There was then Biden tabling an even bigger package of spending that was going to make things like the child tax credit permanent. And so it did seem like, if nothing else, there was a break from kind of the fiscal orthodoxy the Democratic Party had embraced in after 2008. Now I was skeptical of this at the time for a few reasons. First of all, for the sort of broad reason that governments all over the world, kind of regardless of their ideological affiliation, did seem to be willing to spend more than they had after 2008. There just seemed to be a kind of whatever that kind of consensus had been in 2009, it didn't seem like there was the same stigma on massive public spending, at least in the short term. So that's one thing. Secondly, there was a decision made, what was ostensibly a strategic decision made some months after the second bill, whose name I'm now forgetting, was tabled, the second big spending package. Might have been the American Families Plan. I can't remember, but this was going to be trillions of dollars, and Nancy Pelosi announced, well, we're actually going to split this into two bills, and they did the same thing in the Senate, and we're going to have this infrastructure bill that's going to have the kind of like all the bipartisan stuff, the spending Republicans want, but we're going to pair it to this other bill that has, basically the core of the Biden agenda in it. And at the time, the justification was ostensibly that actually by breaking up the bill, we have now the infrastructure stuff that the other side wants and that the center of the Democratic Party wants. We have that as a cudgel to beat them with. Like, we can say to them, hey, if you want this infrastructure spending your way, that's great, but you've got to give us all this social expenditure as well. But I never really bought that that's why they were doing it. It seemed to me that as soon as they split the bill in two, that was creating a situation, was laying a groundwork for a situation where they passed one but not the other. And that is exactly what happened. They passed the infrastructure bill with whatever it was, 11, 12 Republican votes in the Senate. And then other spending package they passed that finally passed in the form of the Inflation Reduction Act. Yeah, there was good stuff in there. The scale of it compared to what they had initially proposed was much, much smaller, dramatically scaled down. So, the assessing the first few years of the Biden administration is hard because it's complicated because, there's ways that there was divergence from the past, but I think there was a fair amount of continuity as well. And the extent to which of those things kind of predominates is very much, people will be debating that, I'm sure, for the next decade or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there will be kind of an ongoing debate about how progressive Biden was. Ultimately not enough, obviously. But yeah, there's the glimmer of stuff that could happen. I think for me, the real shift where I had, because I'd been kind of okay with the Biden administration as that single one term of maybe we get a couple really moderate reforms and then next time we things work out. What I really soured on him about was right around the rail workers strike and the decision to just destroy that. That was when, because one of the big things I remember in 2020, people saying, hey, maybe Biden would be fine to vote for is at the very least we can push him on labor issues. And at the time that seemed right.
I'm glad you brought that up because if you look at the appointments the administration's made to the National Labor Relations Board, that is one area where they've, where they've been better than someone like me might have expected. And of course, Biden did go and speak on a picket line. He's been more during the UAW strike. He's been more openly pro-union than certainly Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. And so that's not nothing. Although the PRO Act, which was the big labor reform that the American labor movement was pushing, Biden did endorse it in one of his State of the Unions, but there was never any hope of. The test. You can use if you want the Obama 2009 2010 test, which is okay when Democrats are in the majority, do they actually pass any of the stuff that they say they believe in? Do they really meaningfully try to pass it, or do they always find like one senator or two that we would pass all the great stuff if it wasn't for a Kirsten Sinema or I'm forgetting who the scapegoat was in 2008 or 2009. And of course, you don't actually need 60 votes in the Senate. When this applies to everything we've talked about, all of these legislative debates. You can also just get rid of the filibuster and pass things by a simple majority. Right. you can do a lot of things by executive order. The American Prospect published an amazing list, the day one agenda, right after Biden was inaugurated, or maybe it was shortly before during the transition. And they basically had all these creative ways that Biden could get around Congress and do things that were popular. Like, for example, really simple thing. And this is the kind of thing that if Sanders had been elected, I have absolutely no doubt that he would have done. The president has the power to, craft rules, enforce rules on federal agencies. So So every business or contractor that a federal agency retains, let's say it's Amazon for something, they have to be unionized. And you can bet that if something like that was on the books, a lot more companies would probably they would be less hostile to having unionized workplaces.
Yep.
Very, very fast. And that's just one example. I mean, the day one agenda is still worth looking at. Executive power. I mean, the one that absolutely killed me was the Senate parliamentarian and the minimum wage. I mean, that was extraordinary. All of a sudden, this unelected referee who literally nobody had ever heard of, who doesn't have an area code in a rich like Virginia, Maryland, or DC area code. Every single no one had heard of the parliamentarian. All of a sudden, this was the reason why Americans couldn't get a promised minimum wage increase. Like Kamala Harris had the power, constitutionally has the power to overrule this person. It's crazy, and they didn't do it. I mean, it's like that is. I mean, they could have given millions of Americans a raise, and they did by just saying, "No, we actually don't want to go with the completely not binding recommendation that this person no one's ever heard of has made. We're just going to overrule that and pass the agenda. We were democratically elected. We have a mandate to implement." That's the kind of thing where it's like, yeah, for all the ways Biden has maybe been different, that kind of thing, there's a lot of continuity as well. And of course, the rail workers strike where Biden he did a very classic thing of, literally being the agent or one of the principal agents. Democratic leadership was the leading agent in the crushing of the strike, in the back to work legislation. But also, of course, Biden then came out and said, well, if my Republican friends will just, turn around, we'll pass the PRO Act, we won't send them back to work, or we'll get sick days for them that they're asking for. And really classic Democratic triangulation that is the sort of thing, Barack Obama would be proud of. and I'm sure is, by the way.
One thing this brings to mind is something you've written about a bit, which is the kind of Democrat rhetoric of emergency, of crisis, of the threat of the our democracy is in peril. I guess do you want to say a little bit about that process? Like what are your thoughts on that? The role of Democrats kind of consistently framing things as an emergency while never actually wielding power.
I think there's two facets to this that are quite different. In one sense, it is really just an extension of what we were discussing before, vis-a-vis sort of hyperpolitics, where there's a disengaged or there's a dispassionate or an elite that's not really doesn't consider itself accountable or responsive to what opinion polls say is popular or to any kind of demos, if you want. So what do? They constantly dial up politics, the tone of it. They constantly sort of rhetorically elevate the stakes of it without really changing their behavior. And you saw that throughout the Trump administration, where Democrats would talk about how Donald Trump was completely unprecedented. He's a dictator. He's a tyrant, or he wants to be one. And then they'd be like, well, yeah, but what are we going to do? Not approve his nominees, or not approve his appointments, not fast track his appointments to key judicial posts. So that's a very it's a very simple instance of a straightforward instance of democratic hypocrisy. I think the second dimension, though, is that I think one reason establishment Democrats say this stuff is because there's lots of people who are, earnestly concerned about American democracy, who are worried about their country. And I wanna stress this because I have I've written a lot of pieces, I've written a lot about that's kind of acerbic and is critical of liberals and diverges from sharply from the way many older liberals in particular see the world. But I want to be clear here. There's lots of people who watch MSNBC, for example, and are following the I don't know, 50 dozen Trump court cases or whatever it is now. And they're doing that because they are genuinely concerned about their country, and they are concerned about what another Republican administration might mean in all kinds of areas. And so, and the same was true during the Trump administration as well. People were concerned about what was going on. And so when the opposition party, looks at kind of that state of affairs, the opposition party during the Trump era, now the governing party, they understand that there's a market for this stuff. And so there's a reason why they use the rhetoric that they do. They're saying, we get it. We hear you. We understand. We're here to champion your cause. But then at the same time, they're not really willing to change their behavior. They're not really willing to just align themselves in many instances with where majority public opinion is, either within the pool of people who are supporters of the Democratic Party or the American public at large. I mean, just look at the polls in favor of single-payer health care for years among Republicans and independents, strong support for that as well. Saddam Hussein-like numbers among Democrats, and yet you cannot get, major Democratic politicians to align themselves with that, or really channel it in their, incorporate it into their behavior at all. And so, that's what I'd say about that. There's two ways of thinking about it. One, it's an expression of, there's a lot here that's just an expression of people's earnestness and their concern, which is perfectly justified. And then there's the cynicism of elites who want to
take advantage of that.
Take advantage of it and opportunistically seize upon it without really being responsive or accountable to it.
Yeah, that kind of, this has been kind of a thing that I have not been sure how to think through. I think is that on the one hand, the Democrats very, very cynically and consistently use this rhetoric of, oh my God, the democracy's failing, fascism is rising. Well, on the flip side, it's kind of true. It's just that they're not the ones actually helping in any way.
Oh, that's right. I mean, the state of America's institutions it's not...
It's looking bad.
It's not strong. It's not good. I mean, it's, across the board, you have a Supreme Court where there's a majority who, were appointed by presidents that lost the popular vote. So, I mean, it's literally a sort of like, a small cadre of robed clerics who now have a veto power over, American, all kinds of important facets of American life. Overturned Roe versus Wade without having any legitimacy to do so, even if you think that the Supreme Court is sort of a legitimate institution in the first place. And, for my part, I think that it's not good to have judges with that level of power. I don't, I believe in popular democracy, popular sovereignty, not that. But you have an electoral college that allows people to get elected in the first place without winning the popular vote. George Bush lost it by at least 500,000 votes and then just stole the election anyway. He actually lost the electoral college as well, but they did the successful version of January 6th and didn't have to worry about that. Trump obviously lost by millions of votes, I think it was, to Hillary Clinton, and he got the presidency anyway. So across the board, there's, and actually that's one other thing I'll enter into the discussion is, of course, the influence of money in politics, which is just completely out of control. I mean, you have not only, sort of this Wild West in terms of campaign finance stuff, you also have politicians through congressional stock trading. I mean, literally trading in bits of the economy that they're supposed to be regulating and overseeing and making a profit from it. I mean, it's really sort of like Brezhnev era USSR kind of stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, that's a real interesting parallel to what it feels like at the present with the U.S. It's one I think of a lot too, is the Brezhnev era and the kind of stagnation before the fall of the Soviet Union. There's I mean, there's obviously very massive differences between the U.S. and that, but I do think that there's something to that parallel that I found compelling. Especially I read a while back. Everything is Forever Until It's No More by I'm forgetting the first name, but Yurchak is the author's last name. It was about like the last Soviet generation and kind of the sentiment. Right. Yeah.
I'm going to make a note of it.
Yeah, it's where hypernormalization, the name of the Adam Curtis movie, is where he got that term, is from that book.
Right,
so
right.
It's pretty solid. Anyway, I think about it a lot because I think of that as the title kind of gives it away, that sense of like, this is going to last forever. The system can't fail. It's been here my whole life. And then also the instant it fails, everyone goes, yeah, I kind of saw that coming. That was kind of what he was trying to interrogate with the book. And it feels like we're living in that moment right now where on the one hand, I have a part of me that's like, this is forever. It just kind of feels like we're going to be having these same discourses forever. It's just going to be Democrats saying we're going to save the union while fascists get stronger forever. But on the flip side, if everything caved in tomorrow, I'd be like, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, I can't remember who first made the comment, but someone very perceptibly said, that it doesn't really so much feel like we're living in a version of 2020 that never ended. It feels like actually we're trapped in a version of 2016 that never ended.
Yes.
That is very much how this, whatever this moment we're experiencing feels. And I agree with you. I don't know what's going to come next, but what I would say is that I think if the past 15 or so years have taught us anything, it's that really quite unexpected things, sometimes bad, but honestly often constructive and positive, and hopeful as well, can emerge when everything seems so sclerotic that you couldn't imagine them appearing. Like the Bernie Sanders campaign of 2016 is one example of that. I was following shortly before that the Labour leadership race in Great Britain, where
with Corbyn,
Corbyn, right? And before he entered the race, I was following it, and you had four. Well, there were more than that, but I mean, four or five, six Labour Party politicians who were basically all running on the premise that the reason they just lost an election was that the party was still too left wing, which, if for anyone who'd followed the election, I mean, highly questionable. And it just seemed like, this is moribund. I mean, there is no hope for this as any kind of vehicle for social change. This is what we're stuck in now. And obviously, Corbyn victory in 2016, 2015, and then again in 2016 during the leadership challenge. These were victories on a scale that had never happened in the history of the Labour Party, that were a total deviation from the trend we've seen across North America and Europe of declining mass participation in political parties. Obviously the project was not ultimately a success, but I think that's nevertheless an example of there are things that can come out of the blue. And yeah, when they do, I think, as you said, often it feels like, well, of course, this is just expressing or this is an expression of what we've known to be true all along. I mean, that's what it felt like with Sanders in 2016. He was coming out and he was just saying things where I'd felt my entire adult life, if people are just given the opportunity to vote for this, they're going to vote for it in record numbers. That's what happened in Britain in 2017 as well, with this massive swing, the biggest in post-war British history, to the Corbyn-led Labour Party. So I agree with you, and I think while the future is uncertain, I do not believe we are going to be stuck in this kind of particular paralysis we're in now indefinitely. I just think it can't possibly hold, and I think that hopefully in ways that will be encouraging, the future will surprise us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of like surprised by the optimism there, but I think that's a good thing to be surprised by. I
think it's a very important thing to hold on to, and it's not something I'm just sort of arbitrarily clinging to. Like, it really is something that's born out of the experience of the past, 10 or 15 years. I mean, I really think that there have been a number of developments which actually have made me a lot less pessimistic. And obviously I don't know what form, progressive or transformative change is going to take in the next, year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. But I think there's going to be a lot, in a hopeful way that will surprise us. And I think that the experience of the past 10 or 15 years really bears that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one other thing, kind of returning to the conversation of Israel-Palestine, and kind of in the kind of hauntology that we've continued to talk about, right? The sense that just things aren't moving, which hopefully they're beginning to move. But something that Israel-Palestine has brought back the sense of like we're reliving Bush era in certain aspects, which I think is interesting. Talking to you about that specifically is why I want to bring that up is, Michael and us being at its start anyway, kind of a reflection on the Bush era and kind of what that meant. As time went on, it advanced and became about a lot more, but during the early years of the podcast, I guess what lessons from the Bush era and from the kind of war on terror era in general do you think are relevant now as we're looking at more destabilization in the Middle East and the U.S. involved in it?
Sure. Well, I mean, I am by no means the first person to make this point, but I think that what we've experienced is a version of what happened after 9/11, but massively sped up. People have said it's like a speed run.
Yeah.
There were things that took years to develop, changes in public opinion, changes in rhetoric from politicians that took weeks to develop. In the case of, if we're talking about the months since October 7th, or also I think probably in a number of other areas as well. In terms of the lessons, I'm not sure there are any that I can think of off the top of my head.
Sure.
The anti-war people were right in 2003, and they're right today.
They're right now. Yeah.
I think I would just leave it at that. But
Sure.
You mentioned hauntology, and I think that to kind of transpose Fisher's hauntology concept a little bit. I think one way of understanding the current moment, as far as the political reaction is concerned, is that we have a generation of political elites who are, in the United States especially, who are above a certain age, shall we say. The average age of establishment politicians in the United States is quite advanced. We can leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really just think they have, they have an inheritance from the past in terms of how they approach, political reality that is quite outdated. They think that wars happen according to a certain chronology at a certain speed. Particularly in the case of Israel. They're thinking about, for example, a thing that was quite literally called the 6-Day War. They're thinking of things like that. They're thinking of public opinion that is, more inclined to be deferential towards political elites in the manner that may have initially been when it comes to the war in Vietnam, and certainly was after 9/11. I think I mentioned this on a recent episode of the podcast, but I'll repeat it here. Polls in 2003 not only showed strong support, majority support from the American public for the invasion of Iraq, they showed that a majority of Americans, and I can't remember how much of a majority, but I believe it was quite significant, believed that Saddam Hussein had been involved in 9/11. Which was beyond officially. The administration was certainly hinting at that, and its proxies were just overtly claiming it. Like that. So, like, a majority of Americans had an attitude that was actually to the right of the Bush administration's official attitude, which is extraordinary. And obviously, if you look at opinion polling now, there's a lot less support for and a lot less deference to America's elites, particularly when it comes to foreign policy. So that's a major difference, and I think broadly it's quite an encouraging one.
That's a good one. Yeah. Well, maybe moving toward wrapping up here, but I guess looking ahead at 2024 here, I think it would be, I think one thing we've learned from the last, decade of politics, at least, is it's really difficult to make any predictions. So maybe not ask predictions per se, but what are you looking at in this coming year as we're kind of approaching, kind of the election year for the world as it's been kind of getting covered? So many elections happen to be lining up in this year. What are you kind of looking forward toward?
So refresh my memories. The elections coming up are the United States, possibly Britain, though maybe not for till next year, possibly Canada, but I would anticipate probably not until 2025.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me find that. I think it was like Time or something that had.
You're right that's a thing people are saying. I just can't think off the top of my head what the elections are.
I did the silly thing of repeating what everybody's saying without. Yeah, here we go. India, the European Union, United States, Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Russia. It's just going to be Putin. Mexico, Iran, United Kingdom, South Africa. Yeah, it's pretty. Jesus, this is a huge list.
Well, so it's quite an extensive list. When it comes to Russia, I think the only thing that will be interesting there is how much is Putin able to cheat? Because in the past, we actually have seen his vote share decline because Russian public opinion changed in a way that made it harder for him to like legitimately claim in public that, oh yeah, I got 90% support or something. It's like, oh, I only got 70% support, whereas, the real number is probably still, like, at the time was probably still 60 or something,
Right.
So yeah, that's that will certainly be interesting to watch, although not because
it's a tight race or anything.
Not because it's a tight. Yeah, it's not because it's a tight race. Political predictions. Electoral predictions. I think that I don't expect any really profound changes. Or if I do, they're going to be for the worse. So I think it's kind of 50-50 at this point whether Trump or Biden wins. Unless something changes. I think there's there is polling that I've seen. I haven't looked at it closely that suggests that Trump may actually lose a few points of popular support nationally if he is convicted of a felony. Who knows? I'm skeptical based on past precedent. I will have to see. I think the most significant electoral event in recent history was probably Brazil, which was last year. That was very highly significant. And, if people want an election to be cheerful about, that is Lula being reelected, unseating Bolsonaro, and then defeating the sort of attempted chicken coup, which ensued in the weeks after his inauguration. Pretty encouraging stuff. I think that in terms of non-electoral predictions that are hopeful, I think that there will be continued disenchantment with political class, broadly speaking. I think that the protests we're seeing right now, the public opinion polls that we're seeing, around all kinds of areas, not just the war in Gaza. I think it really suggests that there is a strong constituency for progressive and even potentially quite transformative change. And it's really, the task of the left to make sure that it's us that capitalizes on that and mobilizes it democratically, rather than the right, which, will try to mobilize it for decidedly non-democratic purposes. I guess I began my answer by sort of promising predictions, but I feel like I'm not really in the enterprise of making predictions, at least at the moment, or perhaps there's just too much uncertainty for me to really give you anything with much confidence. So perhaps I'll leave things there.
There is a lot of uncertainty. Trump's legal issues is a very kind of feels almost unprecedented with, like, is it actually going to happen? Is anything going to come of that? Or is it just, more of that kind of rhetoric of emergency, like we talked about earlier? Well, I think we can move toward wrapping up here. For anyone who's not familiar with your work or with Michael and Us or anything, do you want to plug any of that?
Sure. Well, yeah, you can find most of what I do on Twitter at Luke W. Savage. I'm still writing regularly for Jacobin. I'm now in a columnist role, though, rather than the staff writer role. Writing for other places, too. Also do the podcast you mentioned, Michael and Us, patreon.com/Michael and Us. Check it out. There's a free episode every week if you want to examine the merchandise before making a purchase. But yeah, if you like this podcast, you'll probably enjoy that. And if people are interested to know more about Ed Broadbent, check out Seeking Social Democracy. It's you'll find, I know books by politicians are often retired or otherwise are often kind of boring. Ed was anything but boring. He was a fascinating guy who thought very deeply about both the theory and the practice of politics. I should have a piece coming in Jacobin soon in which I do my best to talk about his career, talk a bit about my relationship with him, and talk about the remarkable legacy that he's left us.
Yeah, if I remember, I'll try to stick that in the show notes after it's out. But
cheers.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Josiah. This was fantastic. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Fruitless. If you like what you heard, make sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and help me out with the algorithm. If you really like what you heard, check out the show on Patreon. There's 2 extra episodes a month. You can find the link for that in the show notes. And hey, speaking of Patreon, this episode is brought to you by our lovely patrons, who include Chris Barker, Leo Zachary Dickinson, I am once again, Regular Sized Horse, parentheses, small, Kyle Gannis, Moss, The Worst of All Possible Worlds, Stephen aka Spike Stonehand, Gavin Aronson, Joseph Gross, and of course, Men's Room Louie. Thank you so much for support. It really helps out. And I will see you later this week, probably on the Patreon.
I eat pears now and shit like that. Shout out to all the pear